Welcome to Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, where we talk about gospel insights through great stories and help you find entertainment that is both true and beautiful. Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree is part of the Public Square Media network of podcasts that seek to bring an LDS perspective into the public square. I'm your host, Liz Busby. I'm here with my co-host, Carl Cranny, and today we're doing a short covering Season 2 of Amazon Prime's Rings of Power series by showrunners Patrick McKay and J.D. Payne. Carl, what'd you think?
I liked it about as much as I liked the first one, which was, I thought they were doing some things that are very interesting and very true in very many ways to Tolkien's sensibilities, but they didn't quite pull it off. Still rated better than the Hobbit trilogy, but lower than the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh, by far. How does it compare to the animated ones? That's the question.
I haven't actually seen those, so I should, but I haven't.
Oh man, I grew up on the animated Hobbit. That's my baseline. It's less fun than the animated Hobbit for sure. But yeah, I would agree with you that they're swinging for the fences and missing, unfortunately. But that's kind of what you set yourself up for when you're going to write new stuff for Tolkien.
That's fair. So I will say the one thing that I really did like was the relationship between Sauron in his many guises and Lord Celebrimbor, who was forging the rings. On that front, they knocked it out of the park. And on everything else, they swung for the fences and missed it. I don't know, maybe they got a couple of doubles in there. It's not terrible, but it doesn't reach the heights that I expect from something based on Tolkien's work.
Oh, for sure. I easily agree with you that Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, is the best part of the whole season. His transformation into Anatar at the end of episode 2 is like, whoa. It reminded me, of course, of the idea of the devil appearing as an angel of light. That's exactly what happened in that episode. If you need a good illustration of that scene will do it for you.
Yes. And then the way he uses Celebrimbor's particular vices and flaws and failings, which we all have, to work on him specifically. Since he's the Lord of Eregion, everybody else has to follow his lead. So Sauron / Anatar totally works on just this one guy. And you can see how the devil uses a flaxen cord to slowly bind you until at the end, Celebrimbor realizes it's too late. I can't go back. I've traveled down this path too far to be able to unravel and undo the errors that I have made. And he's horrified by that, but it works because it's a slow corruption and seduction and burn, and it totally worked for me.
Yeah, at the end there, when he couldn't find his tools, and that's when he starts realizing, I honestly felt like that was a little bit of a Book of Mormon influence. Speaking of Book of Mormon influences, like people putting things down and not being able to find them again. I was like, oh, interesting, as he's going downhill into this influence of pride and hubris and trying to cover his errors that this is happening. It felt very Book of Mormon-y to me, and that may just be because I know J.D. Payne is LDS. I'm always mystified by that part of the Book of Mormon and trying to figure out what is the significance of them not being able to find things. Are they just stealing from each other? And this was an interesting different way to look at it for me, that you're so distracted and so self-obsessed that you just are losing touch with reality.
That's certainly one way of reading it. Whether J.D. Payne put that in deliberately or not, it was certainly a chilling moment as you really feel for this guy as he made his choices, and now the dwarves got their problems with their rings, and the Nine, we know they're going to have problems with their rings for many thousands of years yet to come.
I think that might be one of the reasons that Rings of Power is harder to do than Lord of the Rings, or even than The Hobbit, is that we know that it's going to end not great. Eventually, they do defeat Sauron's armies and not end up destroying the ring as they should. So we know there's going to be a negative ending. And so there's not the same kind of hope that you see in Lord of the Rings. This is a downhill slide, similar to Breaking Bad, right? You know that the whole slope of the show is going to be downhill. Things are going to fall apart.
I don't know if I entirely agree with that, because we know Isildur at the end of the show destroyed the ring. It would have been great. They're going to wrap up all the plot lines except for that one, I think, pretty well. So it's not going to be completely a downer. And you didn't eventually, culturally, of course, we're aware that Sauron is defeated in the end of the Third Age much later. But you make a fair point, though, that the dwarves are going to delve too deeply and too greedily. We know that Sauron will not be ultimately defeated in this particular cycle of good and evil. So yeah, there are a couple things here, but they'll still send Sauron packing and he'll have to rebuild at the end of the show.
I guess it's just that I'm feeling a lot more the emphasis on fallen human nature, which is definitely there in Lord of the Rings, that people are imperfect, therefore they're corruptible by the ring. But it feels even more like that here because no matter what choices people make, they always end up being corrupted. There's no casting out Wormtongue, right? There's no, oh, we made it through, we're going to forgive Gollum. There's none of that. It just feels constantly, we're trying to make the right choices and failing and failing.
I will be curious to see what they do with Galadriel's character by the end of the show. She hasn't made a lot of progress in the first 2 seasons, and that concerns me, both from a pacing point of view and then from maybe just the point of view that I thought their plan was to have her slowly evolve from the sort of rage-filled, I hate all orcs, I'm going to spend my life killing them and get vengeance for my brother, to the much more wise, calm woman that we meet in The Lord of the Rings. But she hasn't made any progress towards that. And I hope they're not going to do it after the show off screen. I hope their show Bible is to have her develop in that direction, but she hasn't yet.
Yeah, because we've got 3 characters we know who are going to carry over, right? We have Galadriel, we have Elrond, and we have Gandalf. Gandalf's making obvious progress, but very slowly. Now he has a staff and a name. Hooray.
What did you think of the etymology of his name?
Oh, I don't remember. Remind me.
So all the Harfoots, as they're leaving, they call him Grand Elf. But it's interesting because then he says, Gandalf, I think they're going to call me that, which is different than some sort of bastardization of the Grand Elf nickname he's now been given by these Harfoots.
Right.
I don't know. What did you think about that as a possible etymology for where Gandalf gets his name from?
It's a little cheesy. And that is one thing that's definitely holding the show down as well, is like prequel-itis. Everything needs to show where something came from. Oh, we got to make up a cool story for Gandalf's staff, and we need to have a cool story for his name. And we need to show how this came to be and how the Balrog came to be. Like, all of these things. It's a little bit determinative. The same way that, did you ever watch The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes?
No, I haven't, actually.
It feels the same way, where it's like, we need to tell how all of these things came to be, how there came to be sponsors, and how there came to be all these things. And it holds the plot hostage because it's a checklist of things we need to do.
And that shows, I think, a disregard for the intelligence of the audience. You don't have to tell us everything. You can, right? Show, don't tell, right? We know that this is an axiom for good writing. And you can just leave some of that off screen. But please not Galadriel's character development. Put that on the screen.
Please not that one. That's like the actually interesting part, is don't show us how random objects came to be. Show us how people's characters arrived where they did.
And on that front, I think the Gandalf plotline is doing okay. I'll be curious to see where they take it, but he's now coming into his own. I like Tom Bombadil. Just as an enigmatic character, he's always just this really interesting part of Tolkien's universe and lore. What is this guy? We don't know. It's never fully explained.
It's a good balance to have him in this season with Sauron, because he's almost like that balance, that someone who, instead of being like deeply involved and trying to control everything, he's uninvolved and he has good intentions for the world and he's at harmony with the world. He's the only one who has uncorruptible nature, basically. Like, that's what he's existing in Lord of the Rings to do, is to be uncorrupted and unmoved by the plot. I liked it. I thought they did a good job for something that Peter Jackson thought was unfilmable. I think they made it pretty fun. He's a little more involved in the plot in that he's pushing Gandalf towards making certain decisions than he is in Lord of the Rings.
I didn't feel like that was totally out of place, because I don't think Tom Bombadil is like a true neutral kind of character who doesn't care about anything. Like, he is on the side of good, but he's just outside the natural flow of things. And so him nudging Gandalf to be in the flow of things where he's supposed to be is, I don't think that violates the sort of covenant of neutrality that Tom Bombadil is based on. he's not completely neutral. He just knows his place, and he would like Gandalf to find his. And in that sense, I didn't think he was completely beyond what we know of Tom Bombadil from the Lord of the Rings books. I would have been interested to see Peter Jackson take a stab at that, but I think rightly he cut that from the movies. The other part that I found interesting, I felt like they didn't quite earn all of the Al-Farazon Númenórean takeover thing. Queen Muriel has not one, but two moments where she's clearly the chosen queen. When the eagle shows up at her coronation, and then when she goes into the water to have the Valar accept or reject her based on the reaction of the sea monster to what she's doing. And it works both times, but Farazon still ends up being the king and doing this huge purge of the faithful. And I don't know, how stupid do you guys have to be? I understand that Numenor is going to fall, but it feels to me like they're checking boxes and not organically helping us understand the flawed human nature that leads to the fall of Numenor.
The Numenor plotline has always been one of the weakest ones for me. The politics is pretty amateurish. This one felt extremely modern in this kind of purging tactic that they're doing, the gradual outlawing of things and pushing people out. I just don't think it works, unfortunately, for me. It's definitely the weakest plotline. And there's so many characters in that plotline. Part of the strength of the other plotlines is there are 2 or 3 people in each one that matter. The rest don't matter. But in Numenor, I swear there's 17 people, and I'm like, I don't remember who's related to who. I don't care about these people at all. I have no reason to care. I know I'm supposed to, but I don't. That one was definitely the weakest one for me. I think besides the Sauron plotline, the strongest plotline for me is the dwarves.
Yes.
The Durin plotline, his relationship with his wife and with his father and the ring, that is great. And the way it interfaces with the elf plot line works for me. That's one place where they really got a solid plot and they made it work interfacing with one of the other plot lines.
It's really interesting because it's not a sensibility we have in our society now of monarchy. They're like, he's the king. I guess we have to do what he says, even though what he says is crazy. And there are all these obvious signs that there is something down there in the mines that is going to wreak havoc on us if we keep going for the meat rill. But I guess we have to go along with it. You can't do monarch side or patricide in Durin the Fourth's case. That's just not an option for them. So they just have to put up with this guy who's clearly off his rocker because of the ring. And it leads to these interesting tensions that I don't think we quite resonate with as a culture, but you could resonate with it not in a political sense, but in a sense of watching somebody you love go down a path you do not want them to, or you know is going to be bad for them. And yet they have their agency and you can't force them to not do the thing, whatever that is. That part resonated with me, even though I'm like, it feels like there should be options if your king goes crazy. Has this never happened before in Dwarven history? Anyway.
Yeah, I agree that it's the familial connections that make that plotline work. That sense that I disagree with this person, but how am I going to gently let them know that? And how am I going to maintain a relationship so I can still have a voice that they care about?
Even if they're choosing to ignore me 90% of the time.
Exactly. You feel him walking that line the whole time, pushing gently, but also I need to stay connected so that I can help with the damage that's going to happen here so that I don't get kicked out of their life because I care about them.
Did a good job of playing the sort of inner squabbling between Durin the Third, Durin the Fourth, and Durin the Fourth's wife, Disa. That felt very realistic to me. But at the very end, they hint there's going to be more Dwarven politics. More people are going to root for the kingdom. And I feel like, don't do that, you guys. You had a good thing going. And now they're going to have to clean up the mess that Durin the Third created by unleashing the Balrog. This is a problem. We don't need more inner dwarf politicking. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, there's a risk of there being too many characters. The series does fall victim to the desire to be epic very quickly and therefore not having time to build up characters. I was listening to Brandon Sanderson's writing lectures this week that he's recording this year and releasing from his BYU class. And one of the things he talked about this week was there's a reason that all epic fantasy starts with a boy in a small village who doesn't know much about the world and gradually introduces everything. And this series couldn't start there. It started with all the things at once and just keeps adding on them rather than being able to slowly ramp the reader up and make us care about each person. It just has to be big quickly. And part of what has suffered because of that is our ability to empathize with these characters. And if we add too many new dwarves, that may ruin the dwarf plotline, that there's just so much that's,
Mr. Sanderson has a good point. I guess I don't know how you would have done that in this show, but we can still recognize it as a flaw that we're not going to rewrite for season 1 here on our podcast. But it still is a flaw that they are suffering from.
I think the Galadriel plotline, if you had done mostly that plotline, I wouldn't have started the Halflings plotline at all. Some of these other ones, you would gradually add them on more, and it's taking on too much.
That's an interesting point.
If you did more single character for the first season, and then you gradually add in more, but yep, can't undo the past.
No, you can't. Does Gandalf even show up and help them? In season 5, is he going to help them fight Sauron? I don't even remember the lore. If he's just going to be off doing Gandalf stuff for the rest of the show and it never interfaces with the other plot lines, that's going to be weird to me.
Yeah, it is weird that we've had 2 seasons and they're still just like completely non-crossing over plotline.
The dwarves and the elves, they've cross-pollinated.
And Numenor is mixed in there too.
Gandalf and Nori are just off doing their own thing. That'll be interesting to see.
Especially now that we've introduced a second wizard, who I assume is Saruman, right?
Maybe, because Saruman doesn't become evil till way, way, way later. I don't know who this guy is. And that is interesting to me, because wizard has a very specific meaning in Tolkien. And so far, this dark wizard character, I'm looking at him, I'm just like, are you just like a human magic user? I don't think you're one of the Istar.
I think he must be.
But they keep calling Gandalf the Istar and never refer to the dark wizard to my recollection. So I'm not sure.
No, I'm pretty sure the dark wizard said there were 5 of us, right? Referring to all of them.
Maybe I missed that then. Because my understanding is that of the 5 Istar, none of them went bad until Saruman did, towards the end of the Third Age, when Sauron was regaining power through the Palantir and all that.
I mean, and they're clearly hinting at why he's going to go bad is because he, instead of just resisting evil, wants to actively fight against it. It's a little different. He seems to have a different approach. And they're hinting that's what's going to corrupt him eventually, is this desire to have enough power to fight Sauron.
That feels very Tolkien to me. That is why Gandalf, in The Lord of the Rings, specifically says, I will not touch that ring, because I would take it from a desire to do good, but through me, it would have an influence and wield a power. Yeah. And that, again, is why I liked going back to our initial sort of thoughts about the Anatar / Celebrimbor plot line. That is the thing that I think Tolkien does really well, and that is the reason why we still read and watch and listen to works from him or based on his work, because he understands the nature of evil and how it can corrupt you in your own idiosyncratic ways, right? Galadriel, instead of a king, you'll have a queen, as terrible as the sun and all of that. The way she wants to be evil is very different than the way Frodo would, or Gandalf, or whoever, and that is something that I think resonates really well with those of us who've done any introspection into what evil looks like and how it could affect us individually and have seen its effect on other people in their personality and their idiosyncrasies. So if they end up doing that with the wizard plotline, sure, we'll just see we'll see the evil Gandalf version earlier, even though in the lore, I don't think any of the Istar went bad until Saruman. But you know what? We don't really know what happened to those other 2 wizards. We've got Saruman, Gandalf, and Radagast, and they're the other 2. I think they're named at one point, but we never see them they're just off somewhere. So who knows? Maybe they're just going to fill that in and we'll call it good. We'll see.
That would be interesting. Let's do a lightning round of ratings. Content-wise, I would say the violence is about on the same par as the Lord of the Rings movies, maybe a little darker.
I would go with that. It doesn't seem any worse than it was in season 1. So if you got through season 1, you will be unsurprised by any of the stuff in season 2. We're talking about content. The Celebrimbor's corruption is, I think, slightly disturbing.
Oh, definitely.
And so for younger kids, just might want to be aware. Sometimes things can be rated R not because of violence or sex, but just because of the nature of the thing that they are presenting to us. And the Celebrimbor, it's not quite rated R, but it's very heavy. And I would put that under content as well. The horror he realizes at the end of episodes 7 and 8, when he realizes that he's been tricked this whole time by Sauron and sees the devastation wrought by his corruption and his failings. That's some deep stuff. And I think the actor plays it really well. So kudos to him.
He does do excellent. Artistic merit. The storytelling is so flawed. The money stuff is so beautiful, right? Like the costumes and everything. The CGI for TV is amazing. Can't fault that, but the writing just isn't quite there for me. So I'd probably go with a 3.
For me, 5 on visuals, 3 on everything else. Maybe average it out to 4. There were a couple times I literally laughed in that last episode as Galadriel and Sauron were fighting, because I'm like, wait, where was that cut? I even went back and I'm like, where did he get the sword? It just magically appears in Sauron's hand. He doesn't have it in one shot, and then he has it in the next shot. And I'm like, what?
He does
okay.
seem to have some magical plot conveniences on his side. He seems a little bit too competent to have been tricked by some hobbits in The Lord of the Rings. Like, he's just like everywhere and knows everything, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's the beauty of The Lord of the Rings, is that he would focus on someone like Galadriel because she is powerful and wise and important, and he doesn't pay attention to the hobbits, because why would he care about how could these little things possibly thwart his plans until they do and kill him? And so that, I think, is Sauron's hubris in The Lord of the Rings. But yeah, in this one, he needs a sword. Congratulations, you have one now. Okay.
Oh, they're getting away with the rings. Poof, he is there.
Right?
I can't even catch how he got there.
Yeah.
He just shows up.
He's Sauron. You could earn that, but they haven't. Yeah, I'll give it 3 as well, but 5 for the visuals.
Gospel connections, 5 for talking about corruption and the devil, basically, like temptation and power and all those things. Not much redemptive value at this point, other than maybe Durin's loyalty to his father and Gandalf's choice to be loyal to the halflings, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think maybe also not Isildur, but his father's dedication to Queen Miriel.
There's a lot of dedication to hopeless causes.
Which is very Tolkien, right? You're going to give this ring to a hobbit and he's going to walk into Mount Mordor and throw it in? Are you crazy? But that's totally what ends up happening. Lost causes and the righteousness of your cause, even if it is lost, Tolkien's 100% into that. The gospel connections to the Númenórean plotline are interesting to me, just in it feels very Book of Mormon in that how soon have you turned like a dog to its vomit after you had this amazing, I just, in my personal study, just reread the part where they have a 7-year siege against the Gadiant robbers, who they are then successfully against fighting, and 3 years later, the entire civilization collapses because they went back to evil. And the Númenóreans bouncing back and forth between Miriel and Pharazôn felt a little like that, and it feels prescient to me. I still remember I was in New York on 9/11, and all the churches filled up that week after, and by December, they were back to normal. And that is a real thing that humans do, ping-ponging back and forth between righteousness and wickedness. And so that's another maybe gospel connection that you might be able to draw out, as the Númenóreans get several indications that they should go with Miriel and keep going for Pharazôn instead.
So you're going to watch season 3?
I'm going to watch all of them. I appreciate that they have a 5-season Bible planned out. I love TV shows that do that say, here's what we're going to do. I still submit Babylon 5 is one of the most well-crafted TV shows in existence because they stuck so closely to what they were planning on doing, and it ends up being amazing. I hate the shows that overstay their welcome. This one's not going to. I can tell that Amazon is going to give them their 5 seasons, and they're going to wrap it up, and then maybe we can have JD Payne on our podcast in 7 years to talk about all of this stuff when he's off the whatever
NDAs he's on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'll probably stick around too. It isn't as compelling to me as even Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time is another very flawed epic fantasy show, and that one I'm usually getting through faster than I am through Rings of Power, but I think Rings of Power is still good enough, and I'm still a fantasy junkie enough that I will be watching it.
Yeah, it's just so culturally relevant after just between Tolkien having created fantasy and then the movies having done so well 25 years ago at this point now. Yeah, I was on my mission for that too when I was like, how you doing, Elder? And Elder Miller turns to me and says, we're here at Zone Conference. I was going to go see The Fellowship of the Ring, but I decided not to. And I'm like, that is a good choice. We'll watch it in the summer when we go home. And we did.
There you go.
Hey listeners, this is Carl jumping in real quick. If you happen to be attending Life, the Universe, and Everything this upcoming weekend, Liz and I will be giving a presentation at 9 a.m. on Friday the 14th in the Elm Room. We would love to have you there. We will be presenting our paper on religious clothing in The Mandalorian that is somewhat based on some of the stuff we covered in our episode covering Season 3 of that show. So 9 a.m. on the 14th in the Elm Room. If any of you are out there and attending the conference, we would love to see you there.
All right, this has been Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, encouraging you to seek after everything virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy. We'll see you next time.